Have you ever noticed how strange the human mind can be? 100 people may appreciate you, 100 people may smile at you, 100 people may quietly wish you well, yet all it takes is one voice, one careless comment, one disapproving glance, and suddenly, nothing else seems to matter. That single moment follows you home. It lingers in your thoughts before you fall asleep. It returns the next morning as if it were more important than everything else that happened the day before. Why? Why do we allow the opinions of others to shape the way we see ourselves? Why does the approval of strangers often feel more valuable than our own peace of mind? For thousands of years, philosophers have wrestled with this question. Psychologists explain that our ancestors survived because they belonged to a tribe. Being accepted meant protection. Being rejected could mean death. Deep within the human brain, that ancient instinct still whispers, stay accepted. Don't stand out. Don't disappoint the group. But the Buddha looked beyond survival. He saw that the deepest suffering was not created by the opinions of others. It was created by our attachment to those opinions. According to the Buddha, the world is constantly changing. Praise becomes criticism, success becomes failure, fame becomes obscurity, gain becomes loss. These are not exceptions to life, they are life itself. In Buddhist teachings, they are known as the 8 worldly winds, the ever-changing conditions that sweep through every human life. Praise and blame, gain and loss, fame and disrepute, pleasure and pain. Most of us spend our lives chasing the pleasant winds and running away from the unpleasant ones. We celebrate when someone admires us. We suffer when someone misunderstands us, without realizing it. We hand over the key to our happiness to people who may barely know us. Imagine carrying a small mirror everywhere you go, but instead of reflecting your own face, it only reflects the expressions of those around you. If they smile, you believe you are worthy. If they frown, you believe something is wrong with you. Eventually, you forget what your own face ever looked like. Many of us live exactly this way. Our identity slowly becomes a collection of borrowed opinions. There is an old Buddhist story about a man who approached the Buddha in great anger. He shouted insults. He mocked him. He tried to provoke a response. When the man finally grew silent, the Buddha gently asked, if someone offers a gift, and it is not accepted, who does the gift belong to? The man answered, to the one who offered it. The Buddha smiled. So it is with anger. The wisdom of that moment reaches far beyond insults. People will always have opinions. Some will admire you, some will misunderstand you, some will judge you without ever knowing your story. Their thoughts belong to them. The real question is whether you choose to carry them. Perhaps freedom does not begin when the world stops judging us. Perhaps it begins the moment we stop asking the world for permission to be ourselves. Before we ask why other people's opinions have so much power over us, perhaps we should ask a quieter question. Who is it that wants their approval so desperately? More than 25 centuries ago, while kingdoms competed for wealth, influence, and reputation, the Buddha turned his attention inward. He was not interested in becoming famous, nor was he concerned with being admired. Instead, he began investigating something far more mysterious. Who is the I that constantly seeks recognition? Most of us spend our entire lives protecting an identity. We polish it, we defend it, we compare it with others, we fear anything that threatens it. We call it me, my reputation, my success, my image, my dignity. But the Buddha invited us to look more carefully. He asked us to observe whether this self was as solid as we believed. Think about your own life. The person you were at 5 years old is not the same person you became at 15. The dreams you held 10 years ago may no longer matter today. Your body has changed. Your thoughts have changed. Even your beliefs have changed. If everything keeps changing, what exactly is this permanent me that we are trying so hard to protect? According to the Buddha, much of our suffering begins with attachment to the idea of self. When someone praises us, the self grows stronger. When someone criticizes us, the self feels wounded. But if we look deeply, we discover something surprising. The criticism did not create the pain. It merely touched the place where attachment already existed. Imagine carrying a beautiful glass bowl wherever you go. You become so afraid of dropping it that every crowded street feels dangerous. Every unexpected movement makes your heart race. One day, someone accidentally bumps into you. The bowl shatters. Was the suffering caused by the stranger, or by the fact that you believed the bowl could never be broken? The Buddha taught that our identity is much like that fragile bowl. The tighter we cling to it, the easier it is to suffer. This does not mean we should stop caring about our actions. Buddhism never encourages indifference or irresponsibility. Instead, it teaches us to distinguish between our conduct and our ego. We should cultivate kindness, honesty, and wisdom, but we do not need to build our happiness upon the shifting opinions of others, because opinions change like clouds across the sky. Someone who admires you today may criticize you tomorrow. Someone who misunderstands you now may one day become your closest friend. If your peace depends upon their changing minds, your peace will never remain still. The Buddha did not ask us to destroy the self. He invited us to see through the illusion that our worth depends upon defending it. And perhaps that is the beginning of true freedom, not when everyone finally approves of us, but when we no longer need their approval in order to know our own value. Yet another question remains. If the self is only an illusion we cling to, why does praise feel so sweet, and criticism so painful? That is where the Buddha introduced one of his most profound teachings, the 8 worldly winds. Long before people measured success by followers, titles, or applause, the Buddha observed something timeless about the human condition. He noticed that almost every human being spends life chasing certain experiences, and running away from others. This endless pursuit, he taught, is one of the deepest sources of suffering. The Buddha called these forces the 8 worldly winds. They are not physical winds, they are the invisible currents that constantly move through every human life. Gain and loss, praise and blame, fame and disgrace, pleasure and pain, no one escapes them. Not kings, not monks, not the wealthy, not the poor, not even the Buddha himself. Many people imagine that spiritual wisdom protects a person from criticism. History tells a different story. Even during his lifetime, the Buddha was misunderstood. Some mocked him, some accused him, some tried to damage his reputation. Yet he remained remarkably calm, not because the words had no sound, but because they found no attachment within his heart. Most of us live differently. When praise arrives, we welcome it like a dear friend. We replay every compliment. We begin believing that our worth has increased. Then, almost without noticing, we become afraid. Afraid that one day the praise will disappear. Afraid that someone else will receive the admiration instead. Afraid that we will no longer be enough. The strange thing is this: the praise that once made us happy, quietly becomes something we must protect. In that moment, praise transforms into another form of attachment. The Buddha warned that attachment is subtle. It does not only cling to wealth, it clings to reputation, it clings to admiration, it even clings to being known as a good person. There is an old saying inspired by Buddhist wisdom: the mountain is not made taller because people admire it, nor does it become smaller because they ignore it. The mountain simply remains what it is. Imagine standing beneath an open sky. Clouds drift across it. Some are bright, some are dark, some bring rain, others disappear within minutes. Would you try to hold on to the white clouds forever? Would you become angry at the black ones for appearing? Of course not. You understand that clouds were never meant to stay. The Buddha encouraged us to see praise and blame in exactly the same way. They pass through life just as clouds pass through the sky. The problem is not that praise exists. The problem is believing it can define us. The problem is not that criticism appears. The problem is believing it has the power to diminish who we truly are. When we stop clinging to praise, blame also begins to lose its power. For the first time, our peace no longer depends on the changing weather of the world. It begins to arise from somewhere much deeper. Yet this raises another question. If praise and blame are only passing winds, why do we spend so much of our lives comparing ourselves with everyone around us? Perhaps comparison is another illusion the mind has quietly learned to believe. If praise and blame are like passing winds, why do they affect us so deeply? The Buddha pointed to another habit of the human mind, a habit so ordinary that most of us never notice it. We compare, not once in a while, but almost constantly. We compare our success with someone else's achievement, our appearance with another person's beauty, our home, our family, our career, our wealth, even our spiritual progress, without realizing it. We spend our lives measuring ourselves against people who are walking completely different paths. Today, this habit has become stronger than ever. A few minutes on social media can convince us that everyone else is happier, more successful, more attractive, more fulfilled. We see carefully chosen moments, smiling faces, luxury vacations, career milestones, perfect families. Rarely do we see the loneliness behind the photographs, the anxiety behind the success, or the tears that fell after the camera was turned off. The Buddha understood this long before screens existed. He taught that suffering begins when the mind grasps at what it does not have, and resists what it already has. Comparison is born from both. It whispers, "What I have is not enough. Who I am is not enough. I need to become someone else before I can be happy." That whisper is dangerous, because it slowly steals the joy of the present moment. There is a story of a young monk who admired another monk known for his wisdom. Every day, he watched the elder speak with confidence. People respected him, they sought his advice. The young monk became discouraged. He thought, "I will never be like him." Seeing his sadness, the Buddha gently asked, "If a mango tree spends its whole life wishing to become a banyan tree, when will it bear fruit?" The young monk lowered his head. In that simple question lay a profound truth. Every tree has its own season, every flower has its own fragrance, every path unfolds at its own pace. A lotus does not compete with the bamboo, the moon does not envy the sun. Nature is at peace because nothing struggles to become what it was never meant to be. Only the human mind insists on comparison. Only the human ego believes that another person's light somehow diminishes its own. The Buddha never taught his disciples to become better than others. He taught them to become wiser than yesterday. That is a very different journey. One is driven by competition, the other is guided by awakening. Perhaps the greatest tragedy of comparison is not that it makes us jealous, it is that it prevents us from seeing the unique path already unfolding beneath our own feet. The moment we stop measuring our lives against everyone else's, we begin to discover a quiet freedom, not because we have become greater than others, but because we no longer need to be. Yet even when we understand this, one question still remains. If comparison creates so much suffering, why do we continue chasing praise as if it were happiness itself? Perhaps because we have mistaken admiration for love. Imagine receiving everything you have ever wanted. People admire you, they speak highly of your accomplishments, they respect your intelligence, they praise your kindness. Everywhere you go, you are welcomed with smiles. At first, it feels wonderful. Who wouldn't enjoy being appreciated? But slowly, almost without noticing, something begins to change. You start wondering, what if one day they stop admiring me? What if I disappoint them? What if someone else takes my place? The praise that once brought happiness, quietly becomes a burden. Now you are no longer living freely, you are performing, not because your heart wishes to, but because you are afraid of losing the image others have created of you. The Buddha understood this subtle trap. He never taught his disciples to seek praise, nor did he tell them to fear criticism. Instead, he encouraged them to see both with the same calm awareness, because both praise and blame belong to the world. Neither belongs to your true practice. There is an account in the Buddhist scriptures of people who praised the Buddha with deep devotion. They called him the Enlightened One, the teacher of gods and humans, the perfectly awakened one. Yet the Buddha never became attached to these words. On other occasions, he was insulted, falsely accused, and openly criticized. Still, his mind remained the same. Why? Because he knew that praise could intoxicate the mind just as easily as anger could poison it. One creates pride, the other creates resentment. both disturb inner peace. This is why the Buddha often reminded his disciples to observe the mind carefully whenever pleasant experiences arise, not because joy is wrong, but because attachment quietly hides inside pleasant feelings. Think of someone holding a handful of sand. The tighter they squeeze, the faster the sand slips through their fingers. Praise is much the same. The more desperately we try to hold on to it, the more anxious we become. Many people believe suffering begins when they are criticized, but sometimes suffering begins much earlier. It begins the moment we become dependent on being admired. The world teaches us to build an identity around applause. The Buddha invited us to build a life around wisdom instead. One depends on circumstances, the other cannot be taken away. There is a quiet freedom that appears when you no longer wake each morning asking, "Will people like me today?" Instead, another question naturally arises: can I meet this day with kindness, honesty, and mindfulness? One question seeks approval, the other cultivates awakening. Perhaps this is why the Buddha never measured a person's greatness by the number of people who admired them. He measured it by the peace they carried within, for a peaceful heart remains steady, whether the world applauds, or turns away. Yet even knowing this, there is still one remarkable story that reveals the Buddha's wisdom more clearly than any philosophy. A story about a man who came with hatred, and left carrying something entirely different. Among the many stories preserved in the Buddhist tradition, there is one that has endured for centuries, not because it is dramatic, but because it reveals what a truly liberated mind looks like. One day, as the Buddha was walking from village to village with his disciples, a man approached him in great anger. He had heard rumors about the Buddha. Some praised him as the fully awakened one, others criticized him, without ever meeting him. The man had already made up his mind. He stepped forward and began shouting. He insulted the Buddha. He mocked his teachings. He spoke with the intention of provoking anger. The disciples were deeply upset. Some wanted to defend their teacher, others could hardly contain their frustration. But the Buddha remained completely still. He neither argued nor walked away. He simply listened. When the man had exhausted his anger and finally fell silent, the Buddha gently asked, "My friend, may I ask you a question?" The man, still breathing heavily, replied, "What is it?" The Buddha said, "If someone brings a gift to another person, but that gift is not accepted, to whom does the gift belong?" The man answered without hesitation, "It still belongs to the one who brought it." The Buddha smiled, "So it is with your anger. If I do not accept it, it remains with you." No harsh words, no attempt to win the argument, no desire to humiliate the other person, only wisdom. The disciples were astonished. Many of us imagine that strength means fighting back. The Buddha showed another kind of strength. The strength not to become what someone else's anger is inviting us to become. This story is not only about insults, it is about every opinion that enters our lives, every compliment, every criticism, every rumor, every judgment. The world is constantly offering us gifts. Some are apt in kindness, others are apt in resentment. The Buddha invites us to ask a simple question before accepting any of them. Is this something worth carrying? Most of the burdens we bear today were never forced into our hands. We picked them up ourselves. We carried someone else's expectations, someone else's disappointment, someone else's misunderstanding. Then we wondered why life felt so heavy. The Buddha did not teach us to become emotionally cold. He did not tell us to ignore every opinion. Wise advice should always be received with gratitude. Constructive criticism can help us grow. But there is a profound difference between learning from someone's words, and allowing those words to determine our worth. One is wisdom, the other is attachment. The moment we understand that difference, something inside us begins to soften. We no longer feel compelled to defend ourselves at every opportunity. We no longer need to prove our value to every stranger, because we realize that our peace is too precious to be traded for another person's approval. Yet there is still one final illusion that keeps many people trapped. Even after they stop fearing criticism, they continue chasing something else: reputation, the desire to leave behind an image that everyone admires. But can true freedom ever exist? As long as we remain attached to how we are remembered, there is a quiet question that few people dare to ask: what if no one remembered your name? Would your life still have meaning? For most of human history, people have longed to leave something behind, a respected name, a great achievement, a reputation that would outlive them. We often speak as though being remembered is the same as living a meaningful life, but the Buddha pointed in a different direction. He never encouraged people to become unforgettable, he encouraged them to become free. There is an important difference. Reputation lives in the minds of other people, wisdom lives within your own heart. One depends on circumstances you cannot control, the other can never be taken away. Think about how quickly public opinion changes. A person celebrated today may be forgotten tomorrow. Someone admired for decades may lose their reputation overnight because of a single mistake. History is filled with such stories. Kings once worshipped by millions now exist only as names carved into old stones. Power disappeared, wealth disappeared, fame disappeared, time carried them all away. The Buddha often reminded his disciples that all conditioned things are impermanent. Everything that arises will eventually pass away. This includes reputation, it includes praise, it even includes the image we spend years trying to protect. Yet knowing this truth is not enough. The heart still asks, if I stop caring about my reputation, won't people stop respecting me? The Buddha never taught people to abandon integrity, he taught them to abandon attachment. These are not the same. A person of integrity acts wisely because wisdom is their nature. A person attached to reputation acts wisely because they fear losing admiration. From the outside, the actions may look identical. Inside, they come from completely different places. There is a beautiful story from the early Buddhist tradition. A monk had become deeply respected wherever he traveled. People bowed to him, offered him food, praised his discipline. At first, he accepted these gestures with humility, but little by little, he began expecting them. If one village welcomed him warmly, he felt pleased. If another showed little interest, disappointment quietly entered his heart. When the Buddha learned of this, he gently reminded the monk, if your peace depends upon how others receive you, then your peace does not truly belong to you. Those words reveal a profound truth. Anything that can be given by the world, can also be taken away by the world. Only the peace born from wisdom remains untouched. Perhaps this is why the Buddha walked from village to village with such serenity. Some welcomed him with deep reverence, others rejected him, yet his compassion never changed, because he did not belong to praise, and he did not belong to blame. He belonged only to the path. Imagine how different life would feel if your value no longer rose with compliments, or fell with criticism. Imagine speaking honestly, not because it would make people like you, but because truth itself mattered. Imagine helping others, not because someone was watching, but because compassion had become your nature. This is the freedom the Buddha pointed toward, not the freedom to control the opinions of the world, but the freedom to no longer be controlled by them. And once that freedom begins to blossom, another transformation quietly follows. For when we stop asking, what do people think of me, a far more meaningful question naturally appears. How can I bring less suffering into this world? When we spend our lives asking, what do people think of me, our attention is always turned inward. We become preoccupied with protecting an image. We measure every conversation. We replay every mistake. We worry about every opinion. The world becomes a mirror, and we spend our days staring into our own reflection. The Buddha gently invited us to turn that mirror around. Instead of asking, how do I appear, he encouraged us to ask, who is suffering? This small shift changes everything. A person who insults you may not be at peace. A person who constantly criticizes others may be carrying pain that no one can see. A person desperate for attention may simply be longing to feel loved. The Buddha never looked only at people's actions, he looked at the suffering behind those actions. That is why his first response was so often compassion, not because he approved of harmful behavior, but because he understood its source. There is a story about a monk who was repeatedly insulted by a man in a nearby village. Day after day, the insults continued. One of the younger monks finally asked, Master, Why don't you respond?" The elder monk smiled and said, "If a person is burning with fever, would you become angry because they feel hot?" The younger monk shook his head. "Then why should I become angry with someone whose mind is burning with greed, hatred, or confusion?" That simple answer reflects the heart of Buddhist wisdom. The Buddha taught that human beings are often driven by the three poisons: greed, hatred, delusion. When these poisons govern the mind, people say things they later regret. They hurt others, they seek superiority, they judge, they blame, not because they are truly free, but because they themselves are trapped. Understanding this does not mean allowing injustice. It does not mean accepting abuse in silence. Buddhism has never taught passive surrender to wrongdoing. Rather, it teaches us to respond without hatred, to act firmly, without letting anger take control of the heart. This is one of the hardest practices. Anyone can be kind when treated kindly, anyone can smile when praised, but to remain compassionate when misunderstood, that requires deep wisdom. Imagine carrying a lit candle through a dark forest. If someone throws darkness at the flame, can darkness extinguish it? No, darkness has no power of its own. Only when the flame goes out does darkness appear. The Buddha encouraged his followers to protect that inner flame, not the flame of pride, not the flame of reputation, but the flame of wisdom and compassion, because once that light is steady, the opinions of others lose their power to disturb it. You begin to see criticism differently, not as an attack upon your identity, but as another moment in which you can choose wisdom over reaction. Perhaps this is what true strength looks like. Not defeating another person, not winning every argument, but refusing to let another person's suffering become your own. And when compassion replaces the constant need for approval, something remarkable begins to happen. You no longer ask the world, "Please tell me who I am." Instead, you quietly discover the answer for yourself. The final step on this journey, then, is not about changing the world. It is about awakening to a freedom that has always been waiting within us. Throughout this journey, we have explored a simple yet profound question: why do we care so much about what people think? At first, the answer seemed obvious. We fear criticism, we seek praise, we long to be accepted. But the Buddha invited us to look beyond these surface experiences. He showed us that the deepest prison is not built by other people's opinions. It is built by our attachment to them. Every time we believe our worth depends upon someone else's approval, we hand away a piece of our freedom. Every time we compare ourselves with another person, we forget the unique path unfolding beneath our own feet. Every time we cling to praise, we unknowingly begin to fear its loss. Little by little, our happiness becomes something fragile, something that can be taken away by a stranger's words. But the Buddha offered another way, not a way of escaping the world, but a way of living within it without becoming imprisoned by it. He often encouraged his disciples to observe the mind with quiet awareness, not to judge it, not to suppress it, simply to see it clearly, because only what is clearly seen can truly be understood. Imagine sitting beside a calm river. Leaves drift past on the surface. Some are green, some are dry, some move quickly, others disappear around the bend. Would you jump into the river to catch every leaf? Of course not. You simply watch them come, and watch them go. The Buddha taught that thoughts should be treated in much the same way. A thought appears. They don't like me. Another thought follows. I am not good enough. Then another. I must prove myself. These thoughts feel personal, but they are only passing visitors. The problem begins when we invite them to stay, when we believe every thought, when we build our identity upon them. Mindfulness is not about forcing the mind to become silent. It is about learning not to become lost within every story the mind creates. This is why meditation held such an important place in the Buddha's teaching, not because sitting quietly is magical, but because stillness allows us to notice something extraordinary. Between one thought and the next, there is awareness. That awareness is never wounded by praise, it is never enlarged by admiration, it is never diminished by criticism. Like the open sky, it simply allows everything to arise and pass away. Perhaps true confidence is not believing that everyone will admire you, Perhaps true confidence is knowing that your peace does not depend upon whether they do. When that understanding begins to blossom, life changes in quiet ways. You speak more honestly, you listen more deeply, you apologize more easily, you forgive more quickly, not because you have become perfect, but because you no longer spend all your energy protecting an imaginary self. And perhaps that is the greatest gift the Buddha offered humanity, not fame, not power, not even certainty, but the freedom to rest in a heart that no longer needs the world to tell it who it is. There is only one final step remaining, a step that gathers everything we have discovered, and returns us to the question with which we began: why do we care so much about what people think? Perhaps now, the question no longer feels quite the same, because along the way, we discovered that the real issue was never other people's opinions. The real issue was the attachment within our own hearts. For most of our lives, we are taught to build ourselves from the outside in, study hard, so people will respect you, work harder, so people will admire you, become successful, so people will remember you. Little by little, our identity becomes a house built from borrowed bricks, bricks made of compliments, achievements, recognition, status, reputation. The house may look impressive, but because it depends on the opinions of others, it can never feel truly secure. The Buddha offered a completely different path. He did not ask us to become someone important, he asked us to awaken. He did not teach us to seek a life free from criticism. He taught us to cultivate a mind that remains peaceful whether criticism comes or not. He did not promise that the world would stop judging us. He showed us that freedom begins the moment we stop asking the world to define who we are. This is why the Buddha's teaching remains so relevant today. Our world has changed, our technology has changed, the speed of our lives has changed, but the human mind is still chasing the same things it chased 25 centuries ago. More praise, more attention, more approval, more certainty, and because those things can never fully satisfy us, the search never ends. The Buddha gently invited us to stop running, not because life has nothing to offer, but because what we have been searching for has never existed outside ourselves. There is an old image often used in Buddhist teachings. A traveler spends years searching for a priceless jewel. He crosses mountains, he sails across oceans, he visits distant kingdoms, only to discover, at the end of his journey, that the jewel had been sewn into the lining of his own robe all along. We smile at the story, yet how different are we? We search for value in applause, for peace in reputation, for happiness in the approval of strangers. All the while, the quiet treasure of wisdom has been waiting within us. Perhaps true freedom is not reaching a place where no one criticizes you. Such a place has never existed. Perhaps true freedom is reaching a place where criticism no longer determines your peace, where praise no longer controls your joy, where comparison no longer steals your gratitude, where your heart remains steady, like a mountain beneath passing clouds. This does not happen overnight. It is a practice, a moment-by-moment return to awareness, a gentle reminder that every opinion, every compliment, every insult, every moment of fame, will eventually pass away, but every act of kindness, every moment of mindfulness, every seed of compassion planted within the heart, becomes part of the path toward liberation. So the next time you find yourself wondering, what are people thinking about me? Perhaps pause for just a moment, and ask a different question. Is my heart at peace? Because in the end, that is the only opinion that can truly set you free. If this reflection has offered you even a small moment of clarity, perhaps carry one question with you today. Whose voice has been shaping your life? Your own wisdom? Or the opinions of others? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your reflection may become the encouragement that someone else needs to hear. And if you enjoy exploring the timeless wisdom of the Buddha through stories, philosophy, and quiet contemplation, consider subscribing and joining us on this journey. Thank you for spending this time with us. May you walk through praise without attachment, through criticism without resentment, and through every season of life with wisdom, compassion, and inner peace.